all whatever broke loose. But again, this was not something I brought up in public. And I would never bring it up in public. And I don't think it is wise to bring it up in public. Every single student of knowledge knows, who studies Ulum al-Quran, that the most difficult topics are ahruf and qira'at. And the concept of ahruf and the reality of ahruf and the relationship of the Uthmanic Mus'haf with the ahruf and the preservation of the ahruf. Is it 1? Is it 3? Is it 7? And the relationship of the qira'at to the ahruf. This is a topic that when you're the beginning student of knowledge, you're like, what is all of this going on here? When you go a little bit more, you learn to simply memorize what your teachers say and regurgitate it out. And you don't fully comprehend. When you do a deep dive is when things get very, very awkward and difficult. And this isn't new. This is from the time of the Sahaba. In the Sahih or the Hasan Hadith of Ubay bin Ka'b, the Hadith of the Ahruf, that when the Prophet ﷺ mentioned the issue of Ahruf, and that there are different Ahruf and whatnot, this is in the version of Muslim Imam Ahmad, Ubay bin Ka'b says, authentic Hadith, فَدَخَلَ فِي نَفْسِي شَكٍّ. In my heart a doubt came that I hadn't had about Islam since the days of Jahiliyyah. This is not a joke, brothers and sisters. The issue of Ahruf and Qira'at caused confusion to somebody whom the Prophet ﷺ said, if you want to listen to the Quran directly, listen to Ubay. Ubay is not some even average Sahabi. He is the Qari of the Quran. He is the master. He is who he is. And he goes, فَدَخَلْ فِي نَفْسِي شَكٍّ. What is all of this stuff? And the Prophet put his hand, and then he goes, it all went away. Now, for the first time, I'm telling you here, what was the crisis? I mentioned it, referenced it, but I never explicitly said it. Why didn't I say it? Because it should not be said in public. But unfortunately, these brothers, because they released the emails, so then I have to then get it. This was the issue. That the issue of ahruf and preservation and qira'at and relationships between them, these are very, very difficult issues. And the most advanced of our scholars, they're not quite fully certain.
Islam regarding the preservation of the Quran and regarding evolution. Yasir Qadi has always struck me as a rational individual, a person of academic integrity. I always suspected that he may end up agnostic one day. He has come out and said his faith has taken a major blow, that he has come close to a crisis of faith. This is an important development because it shows that even the most strong believers, ones who studied the religion in depth, are not immune to the problems in the faith. The narrative of Islam we have been taught is false, and it falls apart under scrutiny. In emails that Sheikh Yasir sent to a private list that were leaked August 2016, he admits he had doubts regarding the preservation of the Quran. Yasir Qadi states, I am personally aware of around a dozen Muslims in academia who had major crises of faith, and perhaps one who has left the faith because of this issue. And I have also confessed on this list that my own personal crisis of knowledge, I wouldn't really call it a faith crisis, although perhaps it came close, was when I entered into this realm during my first year at Yale and felt my world come crashing down in front of me. I didn't know what to believe about the hifz, preservation of the Quran anymore, because there was no alternative. You either had non-Muslim views or the simplistic, standardized, triumphalistic claims that a rational mind simply cannot acknowledge as true. So he's saying that because of what he learned, his world has come crashing down, that dozens of Muslims in academia had major crises of faith by studying this content, that he doesn't know how to make sense of the preservation of the Quran anymore. This mirrors what Noman Ali Khan said about his friend.
For example, I have a friend who's in Harvard at the Islamic Studies program. And I met him, he was getting his master's, then he was going to get into his PhD, again, Islamic Studies. He's not even done with his master's. I went to Boston and I was hanging out with him, and what does he tell me? He says, man, after the 2 semesters, I lost my faith. And the only way I can actually continue my studies is that I stop thinking about it. Because if I think about it, I can't keep my Iman anymore. It's gone.
Why is it that studying Islam in Western universities makes Muslims lose faith? Because Islam cannot survive scrutiny. These are believers who have no desire to become disbelievers, but end up either doing so or coming close to it, despite their best efforts not to.
Like, I was one of the first people that's doing a PhD from an Ivy League. Now I have 10 years in Medina. I still don't know anybody who's done something like this. I mean, and I'm being honest with you. You're all Tulab al-Ilm and have studied Islamic sciences. Wallahi, I'll be honest with you. The shubuhats that I was exposed to at Yale, some of them I still don't have answers to.
This is a man who studied at Madinah University for over 10 years. Being exposed to the academic analysis on Islam has created doubts in his mind he cannot answer. Do you think students in Medina are exposed to academic arguments? No, of course not. Medina University's entire purpose is to pump out more Muslim sheikhs who will propagate Islam further. They only present one narrative, the dominant one, without question. The preservation of the Quran cannot then be a letter for letter, tashkil for tashkil narrative that later scholars verbalized and the Muslim Ummah is taught. He's saying that letter for letter, dot for dot preservation cannot be true. That is the conclusion of this topic. But there's another topic that Yasir Qadi discussed that